Dear passengers, welcome to your flight with Zero G. Today's destination, the truth. Please stay curious and enjoy the ride.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Data Waypoint, Synergy's very own podcast where we talk about our innovative data and AI solutions and also give some insights about the life here at Synergy, our culture, how we work, how we collaborate. I'm Francie. I'm doing marketing here at Synergy, and I have two wonderful guests with me today. It's Max, our lead facilitator here at Synergy and business consultant, and Yamini, head of ops. So, welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And without further ado, I hand over to you because we want to talk about today a little about our organizational setup as a little sneak peek. And I think I don't tease too much if I say it's completely different from what you hear from traditional corporate line chart organization. But over to you.
All right, shall I start?
Please.
Yeah. So to explain the organizational setup, I think it's helpful to also go a little bit back in the history of Zero G. So we started 2015 with that's more or less like a talent pool for data science. So nobody heard about data science, and so we didn't really have a clear idea of an innovative organizational model at that time. So, but like working in a more traditional corporate structure, after 1 or 2 years, we said, okay, we want to really think about some philosophies, and we invented, for example, we adapted Teal and the ideas from Frederic Laloux, for example, in reinventing organizations. Then in the timeline, or even a couple of years later, Corona hit, and so the working mode switched totally. So we all worked remote at that time, and also alignment and communication was more disconnected, and we needed structure. It was quite chaotic. We needed to really have more structure, more clear accountabilities, and so on. So we brought holacracy into the ideas of organization that we had before, and this led us to a pretty role-based and circle-based organizational approach. So it's not classical top-down as you have in most corporates, or also not classical like line structures. We have circles with certain accountabilities, and we have roles within these circles also with certain accountabilities. And these roles and circles work together in our organization. And so these are typical holacracy elements, and this is like the characteristic of a holacracy organization, this circle and role-based approach. But of course, also the ideas from this Teal and also other ideas that might be even more relevant for aviation have also a room in this organization model, and that's how we develop over time. And I think like where we are today, this is a pretty unique approach, and it's a really approach where you can have a lot of impact, but of course it's also not the easiest approach to run an organization. So it's work for all of us daily to keep it running, especially as we scale as an organization. And but it's really worth it, and I think it's pretty satisfying to work in this collaboration mode.
Then thanks, Max. I think this was very insightful and very interesting. And Yamini, maybe you can follow up on a couple of things that Max touched, let's say. And maybe also, you said scaling was one of the buzzwords you were using. Maybe you can also say something about like maybe what kind of challenges this come up when we grow as a team. We're growing frequently. So maybe you can give some insights on that,
Sure.
the challenges, and also like how do you see the organizational setup?
Sure. I think the base level when we started Holacracy back, I think in 2020, was we realized that we needed to innovate faster, which also needed faster decision making. So traditional organizations don't help in that, because there are a lot of levels that someone has to go through to reach a decision, and we needed to make it like very fast during the pandemic. So that's where we started from. We were around, I think, 60 when the pandemic hit, and we reduced to quite a decent number, where we said, okay, holacracy works really well. This is something people are really interested in. everybody feels that they're a part of the decision making process because there are not too many levels to jump when it comes to decision, whether it's recruiting, whether it's finance, whether it's anything else in the ops bit, right? Now we're going to hit 100,
The magical mark.
the magical mark. And the challenge is that in the structure which Max spoke about, everybody has accountabilities and responsibilities which are detailed, but that's something for all of us to realize and sort of act upon on a day to day basis. So the assumption is everybody knows that.
Mhm.
We all come every day geared up to deliver on all of those accountabilities because there's no one to sort of continuously remind you. In traditional organizations, as a manager, you have your weeklies, you have your goals set, goals are linked to your OKRs. We have those cadences, but it's our job and our responsibility to deliver on that. I think that's the strength.
Mhm.
That's also the biggest challenge because the assumption lies that all of us do it every day and continuously build on that. Think of any role within a circle. If you're a circle lead, that's what we call ourselves, and you're responsible for operations like me. I'm responsible for it end to end. And then it's my job to make sure that I continuously grow it without having someone to tell me what to do. So you see, it's a really nice balance. I think that's the challenge as we scale, which also makes us recruit a certain way. Is if you are self motivated, if you are empowered, if you want to pick up these challenges, this is a great place. But if you want a little more structure and someone telling you what to do on a day to day basis, maybe this is not the format.
Mhm.
And then the other part of the challenge is if you want to hire only people like that and colleagues like that, do we have those in the market? Can we scale to then 120, 150, trying to hire that specific set of people who are self motivated and can pick up these roles as we scale? I think that's, in fact, the biggest challenge from my point of view.
Yeah, I would agree. As a corporate kid, working in Synergy now for 2 years, I can agree. I think it gives you great freedom. It also requires lots of structure, self motivation, and alignment. You mentioned the decision making process. So, how we make
Mm-hmm.
decisions here at Synergy are also completely different. You also said we don't have a line chart organization, we have a hierarchy. We call it different, this hierarchy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that and also about like this decision making process.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't vote if we quote our
Yeah.
managing director, right? We don't vote, and we also don't have someone who's telling us what to do. So we shape together.
Yes.
So maybe can you explain us a little like how we do this decision making process, and what is like with this hierarchy we have
Sure.
here at Synergy, and maybe also given some insights about how we run those meetings here at Synergy,
Yeah.
which are also completely
Sure.
different.
Maybe I can start and then hand over to Max for meetings. And we call ourselves dynamic hierarchy because no role is fixed for an unlimited amount of time. The circles and the roles change based on organization needs. When we were smaller, we didn't need an operation circle. It was two people who could do it because we were 30 people. Now we're going to be 100. We need an operation circle. Marketing was a single man show.
What?
And now we have a whole team dedicated. So I think these are some examples that we say when the need arises, we create it. So that's the dynamic part. And we are very well aware that it might change within a few months because the market changes. We are in tech. Today we have GPT, tomorrow we have something else. We can't be constrained because we have to adapt to the market and customers. Customer centricity, and designing an organization around it. I think that's the goal. Decision making, I'll say a bit, and then Max is the best because he facilitates some of these meetings, and it's a huge challenge sometimes, I know. We strive for consent basis decisions, not voting. It's not democratic voting, it's not majority, it's not any of the other formats which we as humans naturally think of. We should be aware that if you're trying to make a decision or you're trying to float a proposal, who gets affected? Do you have their consent? And the only time that someone can object is if they have a data and a fact based objection to it. So it sort of gives us the responsibility to also do our homework. It's not like I don't like this proposal and that's why we shouldn't do it. It's because there's data which tells us that, hey, this will not work or this hasn't worked. So maybe we need to relook at it. I think that's the way we do decisions, but Max can add.
Thank you. Yeah, that was already a pretty good explanation. Like we're talking about like how does it work in daily practice is exactly this. So we have, let's say, we talked about circles and we talked about roles, and of course we have circle meetings, and in such a meeting it might come up a certain tension. A tension is I, in my role as XYZ, would like to do something, and it affects probably other roles in the circle. So I bring this up on the agenda, and it's then the facilitator's job to make sure that probable fact-based objections are heard, that also clarification questions on the action are discussed. But in the end, and I think this is the most important part about consent-based decision making, it's still up to the role, and it's an empowered role. That's very important. The role, whoever fills this role can make the decision about this, but it's also the accountability and responsibility of the role to make sure that this is discussed with the other roles that might be affected. So then, in such a discussion, there might come up an objection that is based on facts, that is based on data. We would discuss it then, and then in the end come to a conclusion, and probably a recommendation that we document, but it's then still the decision of the role owner. So this is probably the most important differentiation between consent and consensus, because in consensus we would afterwards ask everyone in the circle, hey, do you agree? And everyone would say yes or no. But if you have this, it's not very inclusive. The majority's opinion is not the inclusive opinion very often, and also people might give an answer to something they're not at all an expert of, and this we want to avoid. So we want to make good decisions and informed decisions, and that's why we have this consent-based decision-making structure.
I think the basis of all of this is trust. So when someone is in an empowered role, like Max said, and someone has thought up of an action item or a proposal, we have to trust that that individual knows their job, has done the research, has come up with the best scenario possible, and then the rest can obviously object in case something's missing. But again, the baseline assumption is we trust this individual, they're in that role for a reason, they know the job the best, and we just move on with it. And of course, if we make mistakes, we can go back, relook at it a few months later, weeks later, and change it. That's the piece where dynamicity comes in. But I think trust in roles, trust in the empowered roles, trust in this format is the basis of why we chose to organize ourselves this way.
I think within this operations model, then it's also, of course, very important that you identify topics, tangents that might be relevant for several circles or roles. And then, of course, you have to bring it on the table in the circle meeting, right? So that's also very important, because you could say, okay, one is empowered to take the decisions, but I can also not just take decisions. Like that would be then expert-driven individual decision-making and not align or communicate it at all and just do my thing. So that's also the responsibility of all of us to say, okay, I have this and this topic, might also impact operations, so I bring this up as a tension in a certain circle, and we can discuss it.
Yeah, I can agree. Like, I can just speak from experience and for myself. So in the beginning, didn't really like trust, and it was like, how should that work? I mean, how should that work if there's basically no one telling you what to do? But it does work, and I think that the good thing, or the best thing about this, is that we're moving very fast and dynamic. So those decisions are made, and we learn together, we fail together, we learn from it, and then we move on. So I think this is, as you said, all about trust in each other, and like really moving forward and very dynamic. And yeah, I think you have to get used to it. But I definitely see the advantages of this whole setup and decision making process. Um, Maybe both of you also explained a little bit of roles. So we don't really have departments, we heard, we have circles. And within those circles, we have roles, and each and every one at Zero G has an individual role. But besides all those roles we're taking on, lots of our people of our team are also consultants, right? So they basically are data experts and working on projects and helping those amazing things that we do here, all those AI solutions, basically to bring them to the customer. So maybe you can elaborate a little on that. How does it work? So what is a role, and how does maybe a typical characteristic persona at Zero G look like, and what does this person do on a daily basis? I mean, it's definitely differentiate from people, person to person, but maybe just to give our listeners a little insight on that.
Yeah, maybe I can start a little bit with explaining what a role is, and then we can continue with you. A role and a circle can be created or also dissolved based on needs. That's what we said, right? Based on the team needs, but also based on the company strategic needs. It might be up to discussion what scope or of a certain topic is big or small enough to create a role or a circle for it. As Yamini mentioned before, for example, marketing has been a role before, and then it grew and grew and grew. And okay, we said we need a circle for that, and we have multiple roles today. Of course, working in marketing is this was growing a lot over the past years. Yeah, I would basically say it's up to the circle to decide if a topic deserves a certain role. Might be a social media content manager, for example, and this has a certain scope and accountability, and then this role operates with other roles in the circle, and then probably because there is, I don't know, we don't. We this will likely not happen, but we don't do social media anymore, and this role might
Let's kill it.
disappear. Strategic shift, right? We only just using generative AI in the future. Yeah, and then it would disappear, and this makes our whole operations model also adaptable. I would say even more adaptable than in classical structures where you have line departments and they never disappear because they were once created. The people really want to keep it, and because it's also their yeah, it's kind of their, it represents them, right? And with us it's like we say, okay, this role doesn't have a logical reason to exist anymore. Let's not have it anymore. The people that fill the role maybe switch to another role. So I think it's a different thing.
I think you spoke about the consultants and the role split. So, yes, primarily, I think 90% of the organization today are consultants, whether they're data science consultants, data engineers, data analysts, or business consultants like Max. I would say that's 90% of their job. For us, it's always an option whether you want to do that 100% or you want to split yourself while you pick up another role in the organization. The great part is that a data scientist can also be a social media content creator. So we give you that flexibility, all of us, to say that you can tap into another area that you're interested in and pick up a role which needs someone to sort of support us with. The time is mostly split according to that. The challenge is, of course, we all talk about headspace splits, like how do you split your headspace? But I think that's a choice. The more natural split is someone's on a project, they're also the project lead, or they're the engagement manager for the client in question. These are also roles. So, in addition to consultant, a project lead is a role, an engagement manager is a role. We have every circle has facilitators and secretaries. Those are also roles. How we decide who gets a role, we basically publish it internally and say, for operations, I'm like, okay, I need someone to help me with XYZ. This is the role. It's my job as circle lead to scope it out, figure out how much time it'll need, what are the accountabilities, and then people can decide to apply for it. So it gives us the chance saying, I'm an analyst, but I also want to do sales. Or I'm a data engineer, but my passion lies in social media content or in finance. And all of our circles, which are the traditional, it's not the traditional areas, but I mean, every organization has marketing, it has sales, it has someone doing operations, finance, and HR. We have people who are consultants who are really involved in our DEI initiatives. We have coaches, we have mentors. So it's a little bit of a all-around personality development, is how I look at it, which you don't really get elsewhere. You get hired for a job, and then there's a job description, and you just deliver on that. There's scope for us to change that up a bit. Which also helps our clients, because then you have a consultant who also knows how to do marketing. So whether you're on a customer project with customer data, or I don't know, aircraft data, none of the skills go to waste. So it's more holistic consulting anyway. And that's how the split usually goes, but it's completely up to us as individuals if we want to do that or not.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the great thing is when you take on a role, it's up to you to shape this role.
Yeah.
And what I really love, or what I can say for the marketing circle, for example, we have people who are working on projects, right, as a BDA. And right now they are building a dashboard for us internally. So they
Yeah.
basically take those skills and bring them to Series G. And on the other hand, it's as you described yourself. So what you learn in the circles, then you can bring to the customer. So it's a win-win situation. And what is also very special, I'd say, is that you also can change roles. So it doesn't mean when you're a social media copywriter that you have to be that until you leave or
Yeah.
until you die. It's really up to you. Or if there's something new coming up, market
Yeah.
research, for example, we just built a market research role, then you can take this one on and basically improve your skill set and bring value to all sides.
And for example, it fosters a lot this kind of entrepreneurial thinking, right? That you understand how the organization works. You understand that your salary has to come from somewhere. You understand, for example, about the margin. Maybe you can combine certain knowledge that you gain as a commercial project lead with the dashboarding skills you have as a BDA or so, right? So that different pieces of knowledge come together and combine and can flow in the organization in a very nice way. And I think this entrepreneurial thinking is also what is also important for us at CRG. We know how our organization runs, and we want to spread this knowledge even stronger. I think,
Yeah, I agree. Okay, great. Now we talked about a lot of our organizational setup, the roles, how we work and collaborate, on how the split of our consultants look like. And maybe you can also give us a little insight about the dispatch. So we learned CRG is growing, which is great. We have so many new people coming in, and to actually maintain this whole culture, this whole setup, we had to do something, we realized.
Yes.
And so maybe you can give us some insights on that. So what is a dispatch? So what was the idea behind that? What do we hope for with this dispatch? And how do we ensure that everyone joining CRG, on the one hand, like adds to the cultural fit, but also learns on how to adapt to this organizational setup and how we work?
I think we can maybe also combine our explanations to one which will be best probably. So the dispatch is so what is the meaning of a dispatch? Probably not everyone that
Probably
watches
not.
the podcast knows, right? So a dispatch is a critical briefing for a flight crew that prepares them for their mission, right? So you look at weather conditions, you look at just basically everything. And I think to navigate our organization, it's also important to have a critical briefing and to understand all these aspects that we've discussed before, because we don't say it's easy. It's not an easy way how to run it. Top down is way easier, right? So it needs effort to understand, to also refresh your knowledge all the time, align and so on. So that's why I said, okay, to keep this, as mentioned the challenges before, to keep this kind of model running, we need to have such a critical briefing, and also a kind of a testament where people can look and refresh their knowledge from time to time. Maybe also we experienced that if you sometimes ask 3 people in the organization, of course we are like everybody, you get 3 answers, right? So, and the aim of the dispatch is to provide a certain guideline, to provide a framework, not give the answer in every detail, so it keeps people thinking about what the next action, for example, for them is, but provide enough framework to keep this organization running as we have it. And it's mainly really also to connect the dots here and there, and to provide a big picture on what is important to keep our organization running. Maybe this is a first step, and now you can continue.
Thank you. Yeah, I think joining the dots is a great place to start. For me, I think what we realized, as Max said, was if you ask how zero G functions, you would get different answers based on who do you ask. Are they 100% on a project, like we say, or are they working 100% internally for the organization? Is it a split? Like there are 3 different personalities, right? So we decided to firstly come together and say, okay, for Max and me, what do we mean by organization model? Do we want to define it very hard, like hard line, like this is what we want? And I think the challenge was, especially when we were onboarding our new colleagues, is how do we explain what self-management is? How do we explain what holacracy is? We use a lot of these words very interchangeably sometimes.
Yeah.
And then there was no place where we had said this is what it means for us. Holacracy has a definition outside. In Zero G, we've gotten inspired by it, and we've made it our own sort of spin, made a spin on it, and said, okay, this is what it means for us. So when we say dynamic hierarchy, what do we mean by that? What is a role? What is a circle? To give you that starting point to realize when you go to a circle meeting what to expect, what are the traditional roles, what are some rhythms of the company, like when do we do our impact plans, when do we do DART, which is our appraisal cycle, when do we how do we elect certain roles, how are circles created. That's the dispatch. So it's your most important briefing when you join us. It's also a great reminder for us every now and then, because we sort of get into the flow of things and we forget. And then, like, okay, what do you refer to when you want to remind yourself of some part of the organization? That's where the dispatch comes in handy. It is a document, first and foremost, but it's a living and breathing one. It's not set in stone. And the document is as dynamic as the content in it. So we do intend to iterate on it, get feedback in case the circles change, or in case we change the definition 6 months a year or X weeks later. It's Max and my job to make sure we pick up the signals, edit it, and spread the information to the group.
Just remember when we started, sorry, I was immediately wanted to sneak in there because you were talking about these misconceptions that we probably had regarding self-management, right?
Yeah.
So let me state one thing.
Self-management.
Self-management doesn't mean you can do what you want. So, right, because like some people were like probably we're talking, yeah, you know, we have this very democratic organization, and self-management means that you can really do what you want, basically. And I think this is also a reason why we created the dispatch, because it's definitely not the case, right? And I think it's very important that everybody understands what responsibility he or she has, of course.
Yeah. I think there's a saying where if you have a role, we don't have powers, but with great power comes great responsibility. For us, it's with roles comes great responsibility. So each one of us in any role, whether it's a 6-month scope, whether it's a 6-year scope, it's our job to make sure it evolves. It's tied to the company purpose, its values, our strategy, which we revise every now and then. It's also part of the dispatch because we can't disconnect the strategy with how we work. So that's where we connect the dots, is to be able to deliver on that strategy. This is the way that we've decided that an organization like us would function well. And these are some of the frameworks that we have. And of course, it's going to keep having additions, iterations. Maybe we realize 6 months later this doesn't work for us, or a part doesn't work for us, and we change it. I think that's also part of it.
Yeah, it's a living document.
It's a living.
Yeah.
And I think it has continuous challenges also to work this way. And when we onboarded new people last year, and that took over certain very important responsibilities, and we, for example, decided to put all the commercial responsibility to on a lot of shoulders instead of the one of one shoulder. It really needs a lot of trust from all sides to be able to do that. But we made a wonderful experience with that, and we made a lot more profit because a lot of more people were aware of what's important to really care about these client connections and the contracts and so on. So I think this is, for example, a wonderful example where we grew with our organizational model, and where it really pays off in the end to trust. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. But yeah, I have maybe one question for you, one question for you.
Mhm.
So we have the clients and we have hopefully the future talent. So if I am someone who's interested in working at Zero G, so what would be the top 3 benefits you would say Zero G offers in case of this organizational setup? So why should I go for some company who's working like Zero G, or who is Zero G? So what are my top 3 benefits?
Yeah, let's do it together. I would immediately think of impact, the self-impact that you can have here. I think it's quite easy to engage in almost every part in the company, and I think for having to have a meaningful job, it is important to feel that the things that you can do can have impact, that you can have here. So.
I
2.
think number 2 is flexibility.
Yes.
I think my story is I joined as a BDA 5 years ago, and I'm now heading ops. There's a lot of flexibility. You can really challenge yourself and see if marketing is your calling, or sales is your calling, or finance is your calling. Because in most jobs, you get hired for something, like I said, and you do that. Yeah, you can like sort of dabble your way and like see if something else, like maybe people have really gotten into human resources topics. um, in most organizations, unless you're hired for the topic, you can always give feedback, but you don't really know if you can create an impact. Like Max said, here we have the flexibility to tell you that no, you have space. We need roles to drive, I don't know, DI, events, salary benchmarking. Use your time and use your effort to do that. So I think flexibility. Third is it might sound funny, but if you don't like being told what to do on a daily basis, but a nice way to say that is if you're self-driven, and you love to innovate, even if it's on your daily job, without someone telling you you need to do this or this is a to-do list. That's what attracted me to this organization, because no one's telling you what to do. It actually, we expect everybody to come up with their own roadmap.
Yeah.
I think, Francie, when you joined marketing, you said, okay, we didn't have so many social media platforms or channels. You said, this is what I want to do. And the other way is like you come in and there's something already laid out and you just deliver against the expectation. Here you build your own expectation. And I think that's quite different. It's a specific mindset, I would say. It's not for everyone.
Yeah, I agree.
3B
3B.
Would be I think all this also, like, besides of cutting edge super interesting technological projects, I would say that this all creates a certain culture, a certain community, that is also where we have psychological safety. You can just bring in also radical ideas. It's discussed, and I have never experienced that someone was really held back with certain ideas or something. So that's great. So it's really this community that we have, and that this trust and this culture, and of course this diversity of super many backgrounds, that is also definitely a big pro for us people that think of joining Zero G.
Especially organizing events.
Yes.
Sure.
If you want to throw a party, you can if you like.
You can if you like. I think Three is like little bit, it's a tricky one. I think the fourth one, which it struck me when I joined, was your tenure doesn't matter. Your background and your skills matter. Like if you have skills in the topic, if you're an expert, that's what matters. How long have you worked before? How long have you been at Zero G? What's your age? What's your title? None of that actually matters. And it's a high expectation that we hold ourselves to, but in reality, that's what it is on a day-to-day basis. I don't think we identify with titles or roles. It's our job and we
Mhm.
do it. And no one had no I don't think anyone has ever been like, why are you doing this? Like, do you have experience in it? If you have interest, you have skills, and that's all we need. And
Yeah.
I think that's quite unique. um we might not need to put this in the podcast, but like, if someone wants to be treated a certain way because they come up with, I don't know, 40 years of experience, this is, well,
Yeah. Well, no, it's consent based, right?
it's, yeah,
So,
it's consent based, and that's quite unique.
yeah.
You
Great.
just discovered a weakness of ours. Also, you asked us for 3 reasons. We gave you 5,
But
right?
yeah, because you're so amazing.
Doing too many things at the same time sometimes is challenging.
Yes, that's true. Okay, well, very quick about the customer. So, what do you think, like those organizations or this organization setup we have? What is the most, let's say, top 2 benefit for the customer, or also top 3? Come on, bam, bam, bam.
All right. So yeah, that's also something we have in the dispatch. I think this is closely connected to our values, which kind of we derived from what we have in the organization and not defined, right? This is also, we not said, okay, the PowerPoint presentation, these are our values. Now you have to behave like this. It's like it describes how we are, and I think a customer can profit a lot from this. So, for example, just to mention a few of them, so we practice open dialogue with the customer, right? So we challenge the status quo. Customers always say when we come into the project, we bring in a certain spirit, and this kind of spirit is quite is quite unique, and it's not usual that a consultancy company or so is openly talking about difficulties, about challenges, like we do. Maybe another thing.
I think the flexibility in headspace helps, because then you're not boxed into one thought process, because you're doing different roles, you're looking at different aspects, and we bring that to client work as well. So we are curious, we ask you questions, we challenge you, and that's our USP. So we are used to working like that with each other, and we're also not like, again, I think the titles and the position, but we don't afraid to do data and fact based questioning, like, why are we delivering something, why didn't we need to build that, is this the right technology, is this the right approach? Because we practice that with ourselves on a day-to-day basis, it becomes part of our vocabulary, and it's easier to then also bring that to our client projects, which we've gotten feedback that that's what they love about us. So seems to be working.
So, what the client says is true, hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, we don't go for a certain solution because it's like you do it or something, right? So we always try to deliver elegant solutions that are really also a result of listening and discussing with the customer um, what is really their need and what they want to achieve.
Great. Then, thank you, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was very interesting, and I think, well, hopefully, our active listeners now get an idea on how it's like to work at Synergy, because I think it's very unique. And yeah, I hope actually, or I'm looking forward to see how this whole setup is going to grow. Let's see what kind of roles we have next year when we sit here, maybe for a second check in to see where we stand. So thanks.
Thank
It
you.
was great having you. And I wish you a wonderful rest of the week.
You too, Francie.
And catch you later.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye, people.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Dear passengers, thanks for choosing Zero G. We hope you had a great and informative flight. See you next time.